Hello out there. I hope you're having a good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I am Bob Plankers. I'm a staff technical marketing architect at VMware, and it is my absolute pleasure to talk today, do a live stream. I like doing these live streams. They are always a little different and unique. And that did one last week for Cybersecurity Awareness Month. Here, I've got a slide for it. Cybersecurity Awareness Month. Isn't security supposed to be an all the time thing? Well, of course, but and there's a lot of folks in the community that make fun of Cybersecurity Awareness Month, but it's a good excuse to do stuff like this, right? And we've had some exciting news in the VMware space last day or so. vSphere 8 has been released, and so thought it would be a good opportunity to talk about what's new in VMware Cloud on AWS and vSphere itself, talk about some strategies, and just kind of go through the whole thing. I've got a whole ton of slides. I've got a lot of things on my mind. I hope you can join me for all of it. If you have to disconnect in the middle of it, it'll be on YouTube, preserved on YouTube as a stream. You can catch up where you left off, that sort of thing. We're doing this, the Cybersecurity Awareness Month thing. I did one last week and it was all right, thanks to those people that joined us and joined me. We walked through some deploying new workloads, and I did some live demos. I almost never do live demos because they're kind of boring, to be honest, watching things install and whatnot, but some good conversation there, and it was really nice. The what's new with security in vSphere 8, I'm going to lump in VMware Cloud as well. vSphere 8 is present in VMware Cloud and has been running there for a while now as part of our new strategies. We'll talk about the strategies for software releases as well. That's something that we often don't talk about. And I think it's really important. It gives you a sense of what we're doing, where we're going, what to expect. We have talks all October is one of those months that has 5 weeks in it. I mean, just Monday the 31st as well, Halloween here in the US. But next week I've titled the talk Bad Security Ideas and the People That Love Them. I'm going to take a little lighthearted view of some of these things. Compliance isn't security, and other lies we tell ourselves. Is that a lie? Isn't it a lie? Some of it's a lie. We'll talk about the nuances of compliance if this is something that's of interest to you, either willingly or not. Hey, I worked in the public sector for 23 years doing virtualization. I get the compliance thing, unwilling. And then, at any rate, we'll talk about all of that stuff on the 26th. So stop back. And then on Halloween here in the US, we'll talk about infrastructure hardening. We'll get into the nitty gritty details of the security configuration guide, for example, and go through all of that stuff. And it'll be a great opportunity to talk about things. So please join us moving forward. I always put disclaimers in here. I am so cool. I put 2 disclaimers in. This is the general VM world. I'm still saying VM world. VMware Explore, the revenue recognition slide that I might talk about roadmap and futures. Until it comes to pass, it may not exist, or it doesn't exist. You shouldn't treat it like it exists, that sort of thing. The other one, security. Context always matters with security. This one, generally, the stuff that I say here might be a good idea for you, might not be a good idea for you. Context always matters. Security is always a trade-off. And, evaluating the stuff that we talk about in terms of your own organization is really important. So use your head, right? My agenda for today is basically to go through some introductory stuff, set the stage for what we're going to talk about, and, kind of talk about the context of the of all of the security stuff, people things. And, if people stuff bothers you, I know there's a lot of techs out there that, why did we get into computers and all that? Because they're not people. We don't have to deal with them, right? If people stuff bothers you, most of security is a people problem, honestly. If you think about people, process, and technology, most security falls down when it comes to people. You look at some of the news lately about MFA. People think MFA is a wonderful thing and will solve all authentication problems, and it doesn't. Because as it turns out, the attackers can spam it, and people being people want that spam message to go away, so they just hit OK. Now they've let the attacker in. Great, thanks a lot, guys. And so people are the unknown in all of this stuff. So anyhow, we'll talk about VMware Cloud on AWS 1.20, 1.20. Milestone 20 is sometimes how we refer to it internally. and how that whatever. We'll talk about that. Some threats and issues. I'm gonna interweave that in. This presentation's kind of long, so I took some of that stuff out, but we'll weave that in, and we'll talk a little bit about what's going on there. vSphere 8, the main attraction right now. Everything is built on vSphere, right? And so whatever we can do in vSphere to improve stuff and to add features and functionality will move out into the other product stacks. The cloud foundations of the world, the vSANs of the world. vSAN is just a storage product riding on vSphere, right? Like there's some nuances there, sure, but VMware Cloud is the same way. It uses vSphere internally in that. So, and then we'll wrap things up. That'll be really quick. So, I'm also going to warn you that I will talk about the cloud a fair amount. It's a great example of some things. Don't be put off by it if you heard this was a vSphere talk. It is a vSphere talk. Everything is vSphere here at VMware. And, it's not one of those bait and switch sort of things. I really dislike those types of talks, and I'm not trying to actively sell you anything. I do have marketing in my title. I will tell you that. I do have marketing in my title. And it would be terrific if you you and your organization bought several $1 billion worth of our software and services and said that this talk was exactly why, but in seriousness, as I come to think about things with, I kind of sit in both worlds, the on-premises world and the cloud world, and those two worlds are colliding, mostly because companies don't have staff to do all this stuff anymore, and they're struggling. And if we're honest with ourselves, companies have always been struggling. We've always been struggling to do this stuff, and it's not a single thing like the pandemic or the economy or whatever supply chain issues that's caused this, though, they haven't helped either. And if they have helped, it's because these issues have bubbled up to the surface and actually get some attention. Maybe we're not pretending that everything's okay anymore. And that's actually kind of nice, because then we can deal with it. And so anyhow, that's my pitch. Pardon my marketing sort of things at times, but if you've got questions, I mean for this to be a conversation, I have my chat window open over here, and I've got 4 monitors. I know that the YouTube channels have YouTube, and it looks like the Facebook channel might have connectivity. I'm using a product called StreamYard to aggregate and all of this stuff. And so if you want to ask a question, feel free. If you don't seem to be getting a response in a few minutes or whatever, the YouTube channels, I definitely know those work. So anyhow, we talked about, and again, please subscribe, whatever. We'll get to it here. We'll start at the beginning. We're really trying with our cloud infrastructure stuff to deliver 3 major things. First, a secure platform. Really trying to deliver the capabilities that you need in order to succeed with securing your environment and succeed in delivering your workloads. This stuff isn't about vSphere. It's about your workloads. It's about moving your organization forward. Security, especially, it's all overhead, right? It doesn't actually move your organization forward. It might detract, spending time on it. It might detract from moving the organization forward. And it's often like an insurance policy. It'll keep you from sliding backwards really quick. But, we really want to deliver this stuff turned on by default. That's a big thing in vSphere 8, turning stuff on by default, ready to use. You can always shut it off again if it's conflicting with something, but setting you up for success right out of the box, to the extent we have boxes that software is delivered in. Make it easy to use. One of my product managers, Ken Drury, great guy, told me once, simplification drives adoption. And I've just blatantly stole it from him. It's all right, because he steals a bunch of my slides anyhow. But and Ken, I hope you're out there watching this. When it's easy to do the right thing, people will do the right thing. You got to make it easy to do the right thing. And that also eases compliance as well. And we can communicate some of that. And make it everywhere. Make it the same everywhere. And that's actually one of the biggest niceties of the vSphere platforms, and where it's being used absolutely everywhere, is that the controls are the same. They're easy to audit. They're easy to set. You know what's happening when you set them, and those effects are the same everywhere. And so that's really powerful. And we think about vSphere, we think about the stack. I put a few slides together here, just thinking about the different layers. It's definitely a layer cake. And at the bottom, we've got secure boot, thinking about hardware itself. Secure boot, we've got hardware trusted platform modules, TPMs. If there's only a few things that I really want you to take away from this today, and one of it is, if you're buying new hardware, please put a TPM 2.0 in the new hardware. You can retrofit them. It's a lot of digging around in servers and stuff like that, but order them. They're $50 US. Don't quote me on that. Some people say 40, some people say 60, whatever. But the security you get from them is great, and it's cheap additional security there. And so get your servers with hardware TPMs in them. Turn on AMD has got SEVES, secure encrypted virtualization. The ES is encrypted state. So SEV is memory encryption for data that's being held by an application in memory. Makes sense. Encrypted state is in the CPU. So if there's a CPU vulnerability, that helps future-proof it. And that's a really interesting technology. Intel Trusted Execution Technology too. That's something that Intel has to help attest and validate platforms. These platforms, we talk about zero trust in the industry a lot. And when it gets down into the infrastructure, we end up kind of going the opposite way. We've developed a lot of things to help us create trust. It's instead of zero trust, it's kind of like all the trust. And, zero trust works great for workloads. But how do you do some of those technology or those techniques with a storage array? You need different ways of doing that. How do you do it with your CPU? How do you trust your CPU? And so there's technologies there that when you're building hosts, when you're reinstalling, if you're doing ESXi 8 now, thinking about rebuilding your environment, turn these on, enable them, live it, love it, learn it, that sort of thing. On top of that, we've got signed VIBs. The VIB is a VMware vSphere installable bundle. It's akin to RPMs on a Linux box or deb files and all that sort of stuff. How packages get installed and all of the stuff coming from VMware is signed now, so that we can prove its authenticity. On that, we can build, and we'll talk about this with vSphere 8, things to check for those signatures, so that binaries that are installed, binaries that aren't installed, binaries that are installed are allowed to run. Binaries that aren't installed, that an attacker may have copied over there, can't be run. And that's the exec installed only thing. It's something that we tried in vSphere 7, but the ecosystem wasn't ready for it. vSphere 8, we turned it on. It's a good opportunity to actually draw a line in the sand. We turn it on, we make it hard to turn off. You get undismissible warnings. Well, I'm getting ahead of myself, but it's really cool. Configuration encryption, ESXi 7 update 2 starts encrypting its configuration, so we're not storing secrets in the clear on disk. The boot volumes, that's really helpful for media lifecycle and all that stuff. You don't have to crush as many drives, that sort of thing, which is fun. Like it's kind of cathartic having the Iron Mountain, for example, has got a big truck, not an endorsement, just a statement. You get a big truck that they can pull up to your organization. You can dump all your hard drives in, and it's a big grinder. A lot of fun to watch that thing. But it's even more fun to just keep the media and use it for other things. Key persistence sealing, those are TPMs, TPM functions. If you've got a trusted platform module in your host, we can seal secrets in there as a secure enclave. TPMs can't be removed. Well, they can be removed, but you can't read from them once they're removed from the host that they were first installed in. And so there's protections there. CPU schedulers, we've got the side channel aware schedulers. CPU vulnerabilities are not really VMware's problem, but they are in some. There are ways to help you cope with them, and so we've got side channel aware schedulers that you can choose how you want your system to behave. You can trade it off against performance and security, all that stuff. And then VM sandboxes, something that we did in 7 and improved in 8. Is the idea of a sandbox around a running VM, so that if an attacker does get through, that fabled VM escape, it happens from time to time, and that's exactly where you don't want attackers to be, is in your hypervisor. So can we protect against that? And we have those protections. That's at the VM level. Then moving up, the cluster level, vCenter level, we've got host attestation. The host boots, and it it can check. The vCenter server comes along. When the host is booting, secure boot and TPMs will work together to store information about how the system booted, the cryptographic signatures, all that stuff. And vCenter server can come along and attest it, can go through all of that data and say, hey, it's booted in a good configuration. Everything is legitimate. All the software that booted is legitimate. All is good. And it can say, yes, this host is attested. You can see that in the security monitor tab in vCenter server. vSphere 7 and now in vSphere 8, it takes that a little bit further with vSphere Trust Authority. You know, the idea that if a host doesn't pass attestation, there's not a whole lot that vCenter server can do about it because of dependencies. But if you've got another cluster, you build another small cluster, maybe we can hook the key providers up there so that if a host doesn't pass attestation, it doesn't get access to our cryptographic keys, you know, and maybe it's kind of shunned from the clusters, that sort of thing. And so that's what Trust Authority does in a nutshell, you know, actually gives this stuff some teeth. And that's nice. Native key provider, great way to add encryption to environments, and the VM and vSAN encryption being those things. Identity federation. And I see a question coming in from Victor K here. Any chance to allow Azure AD as an identity source with Azure MFA? Identity federation started, so I'll say vSphere 8 has all of the same functionality that vSphere 7 does. In GA form, vSphere 8 is the same. In the update 1 timeframe, basically the lifespan, and we'll talk about these releases here in a minute. In that time frame, we are bringing in the Workspace ONE broker stuff, that functionality, so that we can federate better with Azure AD, Okta's pings, you know, Bob's random authentication or identity provider one, you know, like in my closet here, whatever, you know. And so that's our strategy. We'd actually like to get vSphere out of the identity management business, minus the break glass sorts of things on ESXi and perhaps administrator at vSphere.local. That stuff will continue to exist in the sort of break glass scenarios. You know, everything's down, bunch of stuff is wrong. We can't talk to the identity provider. We still need a way to fix that. But beyond that, we want to turn this stuff over to things that actually are good identity providers, you know, rather than continuing to bolt this stuff on to vCenter server and making it's gnarly right now, you know. And so cleaning that all up has been on our list for a long time, since GA of vSphere 7, to be honest. And update 1, don't quote me on it. I know this is being recorded in YouTube, you know, and so it's dangerous. But that's why I put the RevRec statement in there. And this is also the messaging that was at VMworld. VMware Explore this year. I don't know how long it's going to take me to get to stop saying that. So hope that helps. There will be a bunch of talk about that in about 6 months, hopefully, you know, and so we'll talk about releases. Then, of course, vMotion, DRS, HA, fault tolerance. Is vMotion a security thing? Absolutely. It's a security thing. It's an availability thing. And and that's important. Then at the VM level, VTPMs, virtual TPMs, which have nothing to do with hardware TPMs. You know, you can have VTPMs added to your workloads on hosts that don't have normal or hardware TPMs. It's TPM 2.0. It's virtual. It's based in VM encryption. You do need to turn on native key provider, for example, or have a key provider. But incredibly helpful, especially if you want to run those newfangled Windows OSs, Windows 11, that which requires it. That was quite the bombshell, I will say, you know. And so but it's there. There's a bunch of stuff. VBS, virtualization-based security. Microsoft also calls it hypervisor code integrity, HVCI, device guard, credential guard. We support that and support it really well. And on AMD, on Intel, and we make it perform really well too. You're doing nested hypervisors is basically what it is. And it's kind of crazy and it works really well. And VSGX, we can pass the Intel SGX stuff through to workloads that want to use it. SEVES, same sort of thing. Workloads that can support that, we can use it directly. And the nice thing about SGX requires application support. AMD SEVES is it's absolutely transparent to the underlying or to the applications. So you can do it to the VM And well, the guest operating system has to support it, but the applications don't even know what's happening to them. It's great. It's kind of like the frog in the boiling pot of water sort of thing. But at the top of all of this stuff, of course, is these are all the icons. We've got Cloud Foundation. Let's see if I can remember what they are. Cloud Foundation, and then VMware Cloud on AWS with a yellow box there. VCDR, VMware Cloud Disaster Recovery. Really interesting product. And there's a bunch of ransomware stuff that's new. We'll talk about that. NSX and the networking, a lot of stuff going on there. Very workload focused, but a lot of great stuff catching ransomware, being able to detect attacks that are happening, that sort of thing. And then the management stuff. It's been renamed ARIA as part of the announcements at Explore. I got it right. The VMware Explore, that whole management stack. And there's a lot of really cool stuff there. I mentioned availability. The CIA triad is how we really think about a lot of these features. A lot of the stuff that I just went through can be filtered into these different features. Confidentiality is usually what we think about for security. Keeping our data away from the bad actors of the world, the threats. Keeping it safe and secure. But integrity is a big part of it too. When I leave data somewhere, when I store data somewhere, I expect to come back and find it in the state that I left it, right? Other people are not authorized to change it. The arrays themselves, the storage arrays, my local hard drive here that failed the other day, spinning disk, it was not authorized to fail. I did not give it permission to fail, and that was an integrity problem, But joking aside, integrity is a big thing too. Availability is the big one, though, and availability helps us avoid outages. It helps us patch. Patching, if we can't patch, how do we survive a real outage, right? If we don't have the availability there to survive patching, which is just a brief scheduled outage, hopefully a brief and hopefully a scheduled outage, but and patching is a thankless job. At best, nobody notices anything, and that's perfect. At worst, something changed, and so I get it. I did this stuff, right? But it's a design problem, availability. But to my point, you can filter all of these things into the one or more of these categories, and it makes everything. I think there's like a couple of features. Somebody came up with the idea that maybe some of the new GPU AI ML features in vSphere don't fit into this sort of stuff right now. Whatever. All the rest of it fits. You can sort it in. It's all a security problem, right? So let's see. We got some questions out here. How to enable VTPM on a VM level? Basically, I'll show that in a minute here. Basically, you enable native key provider or enable a key provider. Native key provider is a good choice to get started. And then you right click on the VM, edit settings, and add a virtual TPM. I'll show it in the context of VMware Cloud. It's roughly the same for vSphere as well. But I am trying to focus on vSphere 8 here. So that's a vSphere 7 thing. There's stuff on YouTube. Check out our YouTube channel for this. There's a guy named Bob, looks very strikingly like me, that talks about some of the stuff as well. One of the big questions that we get from time to time, can you release a branch of vSphere that only has security updates? And, because people only want to apply confidential, they really mean confidentiality, and our answer, a little bit tongue in cheek, but it ends up, we're serious. We call it the main branch of vSphere. And yes, we do release that branch. Integrity and availability are big things as well. If there's a bug, not that we ever have bugs, but should one occur that affects the integrity and availability of the platform, we'd want to fix that as well. And we'd want you to fix it in your environments. One of the things that we are doing, though, is not tying security updates to update releases or security vulnerability announcements to update releases. Sometimes they coincide. And so really trying to, and we saw this, especially with the re-release of vSphere 7 Update 3, that there was a VMSA that happened at the same time. And so there was a patch for Update 2 that was released to fix it, along with Update 3 that fixed it as well. And that's really important to us moving forward. Helps, the update releases add features, right? And require some requalification in environments, maybe changes to documentation. And so forcing people to choose between security and, process stuff, we can do something there. And so we're going to do that moving forward. So speaking of that, vSphere 6 and 7 had and 6.0, 6.5, 6.7, and those are going end of general support shortly here. I believe the end of this week. The If you look at the trends, we've always had a GA release and 3 updates: update 1, update 2, update 3, separated by about 6 months. And we intend to change. We intend to continue that trend. I'll elaborate on that in just a second here. That add features and functionality. They're akin to Microsoft does this. Started doing it with Windows NT service packs back in the day, and it's a way for us to continue to deliver and get features out rather than have all that change every time there's a new major version. Maybe we can just have a little bit of smaller change all the way through. And so, and that's been a really successful model. There's something similar in the VMware Cloud space. The VMware Cloud space has got even numbered releases, which are fully public. And so we're at M20 right now, 1.20, a milestone 20, and that includes vSphere 8 and things. But there's also intermediate releases that aren't public, but you can ask for them, and you'll see us announce them and talk about changes. They're kind of like preview releases in many ways. vSphere 8 actually showed up in 1.19, milestone 19. And you can ask for it if you want to deploy it, test it, that sort of stuff. But the full public releases are the even ones. And so how does this mesh together? We're really starting to think about all of this stuff as one continuous, is one big happy family. I don't know if I go that far, but how do these things relate to each other? We really want to run our infrastructure products in the cloud first, in an environment that we can control, have our SREs look at them, work things out, have bugs exposed there before it goes to on-premises. And so to that end, the release, this is basically the releases. If we're talking every 6 months or so for vSphere, and we're talking every 6 months or so or every 3 months or so for a cloud release. So 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, whatever. And every 6 months between an even release, 6 months between an odd release, and then now there's the announcement that what happened yesterday actually isn't GA. It's IA, initial availability. And it's really just an extension of this cloud model for the on-premises side of things. So in 4 to 6 weeks, and our Vice President of Product Management, Paul Turner, great person there, driving the on-premises ship. He had a blog post yesterday, I believe, talking about this, and trying to explain it. And put simply, it's just the cloud model where it's great for our ecosystem. It's, everyone says, oh, it's just an open beta. Well, no, this is production code. We feel strongly about it. We've, in the light of vSphere 7 update 3, we revamped a lot of testing, and we feel very strongly about the stability of what got released yesterday. But the ecosystem also wants to catch up too. So it offers partners an opportunity to spend the next 4 to 6 weeks getting their additional drivers qualified and all of that stuff before, and they can say they support GA then and not IA. And so, whatever. But the moral of the story is you'll have a little bit of time, and we're going to do this with the update releases as well. What'll happen if you do install it right now, it'll just be a patch. There are not separate release trains or anything like that. And in fact, if you were part of the beta, you'd actually notice that the betas that we run a continuous beta program. And if you're interested in that, you should talk to your sales team. But if you did have it installed from a beta, you'll notice that you can upgrade from the beta to, at least I was able to in my lab environments, upgrade from the betas to the production release yesterday. And that's cool. That hasn't happened before. So new stuff going on there. I do want to say that, a lot of the stuff, a lot of the cloud talk speaks to cloud operating models. And I do remind people that cloud operating models are ways of thinking. They're process things. They're not locations, and when we choose to use locations and particular technologies, we choose because of the inherent advantages of those locations, of those technologies, but we want to apply the same processes and techniques to them, especially with security. The same security process, whether you're in the cloud or on vSphere or vSphere Plus, all of this stuff, less time spent. It's all overhead, right? I mentioned that earlier. It's all overhead. So we want to minimize how much time you're spending on that. And when it's the same process, you get lower human error rates. Not that you ever make a mistake. I know as a sysadmin, I never made any mistakes. But should it happen? In theory, I've heard of stories that people have made mistakes in the past. Those error rates should, clearly I'm sarcastic here. I'm sorry if you're in another language and I'm trying to be humorous, but we want to drive the error rates lower. Human error have less opportunity. Those errors are where attackers exploit environments. Those cracks and gaps are really where they hide. And so if we can have one process to rule them all, that would be perfect, because it's also one process to audit, right? You get to explain it to your compliance auditors once. Are there interim security? A question that we get, are there interim security releases for VMware Cloud to handle security issues? Yes and no. Most of these things are handled seamlessly behind the scenes by our SREs, our site reliability engineers. Fancy way of saying sysadmins. I know they might argue with me. We can talk about that over an adult beverage sometime. But most issues are handled behind the scenes. And one good example of that was Log4j last year. Let's not have this year again. It's kind of followed up the holiday season, at least in the US here. But Log4j was a good example of our SREs. Within a couple of hours of the world learning about this problem, we had VMware Cloud on AWS customers protected. And so that's really cool. And then customers there didn't have to worry about it throughout the holidays. So another question we get, can on-premises customers, the vSpheres and VCF customers of the world, use the same techniques as we use in VMware Cloud on AWS? And the answer is sometimes, and the VMSAs often have a knowledge base article and Q&A. I write the Q&As along with our security response center folks and our corporate comms folks. And we will add notes if you can do that. But, we really take it as feedback to try to improve the on-premises products as well. How do we enable people to do that? And so there's a feedback process. But, it really goes to highlight, especially the cloud stuff. Security is always a trade-off. I've mentioned this several times. I will continue mentioning. Security always depends on context. The specific implementation details of your environment will dictate whether a security control is a good idea or not, or what that control is set to if you have options. It's not all binary. And then compliance, especially, is always a negotiation. Implementation guides, disastigs, all of that stuff. It's somebody's opinion about how to meet the compliance regulation, but it's not the compliance regulation itself. Remember that, it's negotiable, and it's negotiable with the auditors. You ask the auditors, hey, what do you think about it? So anyhow, let's get through the VMware Cloud stuff here. If you've got questions, please put them out on the chat channels and that. But and I hope this is useful. So, a new portal for scheduling updates. One of the things about VMware Cloud is that we take care of the life cycle for everything. And so, how do you know when that's going to happen? Well, you can request it, or sometimes you just get an email out of the blue. There's a new portal for scheduling it and coordinating that sort of stuff, and that's very helpful. NSX Manager, one of the big things actually out of Log4j was people who had accidentally exposed their vCenter servers to the internet by using any rules and in their firewall. And that's great. It makes access from home really easy, but we don't recommend it because the attackers love it too. And so that sort of thing. The NSX Manager tab, if you are a VMC customer, the NSX Manager is going to be the preferred interface moving forward. There's a network tab when you log in, and that's actually deprecated. It's going to go away. And so ransomware recovery, big news at VMware Explorer. I just straight up stole one of their slides. The VMware Cloud disaster recovery product has got ransomware detection, recovery, automation there. Really cool. I'm not going to get into it directly. I know we have a lot of materials on it, but if you're interested in it, check it out. This is a sort of integration that, being able to catch attacks as they're happening, really reduce the amount of time. Ransomware, I think it was IBM had a study that said ransomware attacks are on average 341 days long. And that's insane. That's crazy, and think about that as the average, how long some of those are. And can we reduce that to single digit days, maybe even hours? That would be really, really cool. VTPM support. And here, the question earlier, adding VTPM support to the VMware Cloud side of things, you just basically right click, you add a new device. Milestone 20 SDDCs that are deployed automatically have native key provider configured for them. And so you can just turn it on. The VM gets, the home files get encrypted, and you have a VTPM. It's TPM 2.0. The guest operating system can't tell the difference between that and a physical piece of hardware, TPM hardware, and that's perfect. So really easy to use. Slightly harder on premises. You have to enable native key provider. That usually takes about 45 seconds to a minute, and that's kind of our record. It'll take you 2 minutes to do it because you have to think of a good name for it. But other than that, yeah. One of the things in vSphere 8 though is the cloning workflows. What if you have a template? What if you have a workload that has a TPM and you want to clone it? Well, what happens? A clone, you expect a clone to be an exact copy of the VM, right? That's always traditionally what it's been. And there's a lot of use cases that depend on that, but sometimes you don't want that. Sometimes you want a nice blank TPM because you don't want to share secrets. You don't want to have secrets in all of your deployed VMs, for example. So you actually have a choice, vSphere 8. And the workflow, you can set the default. It's an advanced vCenter server parameter that you can set. Which one of these is the default if you want to set that. Otherwise, you can choose. And the API is supported as well. So again, reminder, ask questions in the chat. And if it doesn't seem like I'm seeing your question, I apologize for that. Try the YouTube stream. We're on the VMware Cloud YouTube channel and on the vSphere channel as well. We're all over the place to help you out. So let's talk about the main attraction here, vSphere 8. The big announcement from yesterday. Not that VMC is not a main attraction, but that was a few weeks ago. That's the new hotness is vSphere 8 and some of the new things in there. SGX. So we talked a little bit about SGX. I didn't go into it too much, but SGX is the ability for an application to collude with hardware to keep a secret from everything else. And so, it basically creates a secure enclave in memory that only the CPU can get to, and only the application can get to. And the guest operating system, Windows, Linux, can't see into it. The virtual machine runtimes, the hypervisors, all of that stuff can't see into it. It can see just enough to be able to manage that piece of memory and know that it's there and not overwrite it, but they can't see the data inside of it. Things can execute inside of it, which is kind of cool. You can put logic and sensitive logic and things in there. They're not huge. These enclaves are not huge, but if you choose to use them, the support passes through to the virtual machine and to the application directly from the hardware. There's some gotchas there. You lose when you keep secrets from the hypervisor says, hey, I'm going to take my ball and go home. You're not going to get vMotion. If you don't let me see into your VM, you can't have vMotion. You can't have snapshots, all that stuff. But that's a design thing. Applications can cope with that. You can't actually vMotion with this. The application is bound to the hardware too. Can't even cold vMotion. But for clustered applications, that might be fine, and so again, design choice. vSphere 8 adds support for multi-socket systems with SGX. That was a design constraint prior, but new Ice Lake, I think it's Ice Lake CPUs, and that can do multi-socket SGX and remote attestation via Intel. Whether that's right for your application or not, you need to check that out. But Intel's working hard to make this a more flexible thing, and we appreciate it. TLS 1.2 and 1.3 is on the roadmap. That's a big question that we get. The and better Cipher suites. TLS 1.2 and ES6i is the only option for ES6i. In fact, if you try to set it right now, and we'll fix this, if you try to go in there and set it to enable TLS 1.0 or 1.1, I'm not sure why you would want to at this point, but if you try that, you'll actually end up kind of causing problems, disconnections. There's some notes in the release notes for vSphere 8 about that. And yeah, there's no reason to run TLS 1.2 at this point. It comes down to Cipher suites. And we've really cleaned up. One of our engineering architects and I spent a bunch of time taking a look at the whole the whole ecosystem as far as what we need to support for Cypher suites. Can we more closely match the best practices that security scanners have or random internet sites have, and that, because compliance, people can spend thousands of staff hours. Organizations do spend thousands of staff hours messing around with this stuff. And I got to tell you, it's not how your organization is getting hacked. So, these are very safe ciphers. They're all as part of TLS 1.2. They all meet requirements for FIPS and all that stuff. But we can't do the absolute best practices because security depends on context, and our context includes Windows Server 2012, at least until October of next year. I think it's like October 24th of next year, 2023. And it doesn't do some of the more modern ciphers, at least out of the box. And so we need to be cognizant of that. And so, this is a much better list of ciphers than was in vSphere 7 and in vSphere 6.7 and that. And we will continue improving that as we go. But this is probably what we've got for the lifespan of 8. We can't change this sort of stuff midstream. But yeah, again, remember, compliance scanners are somebody's opinion. You can negotiate it. It's somebody's opinion. You can negotiate it to prioritize it. You can also accept the risk of these things if it's not a great risk. I mentioned earlier, and I remind you in 2 weeks here, we're actually going to talk about the nuances of compliance and compliance versus security, that sort of thing. And so we'll cover a lot of this stuff. So please come back and join us then. Preventing untrusted binaries. I mentioned exec installed only earlier, and the VIB. What is a VIB? A vSphere installable bundle. It's again akin to RPMs and that. They're cryptographically signed when they come from VMware, and most of our partners as well. And the exec installed only flags help enforce that if a binary executes on ESXi, it needs to come from a VIB that was signed. It needs to be associated with a signed VIB. There's some considerations here. Not all legitimate software in our ecosystem is signed, and so that'll be a consideration. Community supported stuff, there's a bunch of very valid stuff out there, and that'll be something that we need to deal with moving forward, find a solution for. And that if you turn off exec installed only in vSphere 8, you will get an undismissible warning. And that's part of our efforts there's no single way to tell that you're under attack, that an attacker is in your environment and doing bad stuff, and so the big thing is to have clues that something is wrong, and leave these breadcrumbs that when, as a vSphere admin, when you log in, you'll see an alarm, something is amiss. Have you ever read the book? Clifford Stoll has got a book called The Cuckoo's Egg, where he basically did this in like the 80s on a VAX or something like that, and where there was an accounting error, like a 73-cent accounting error or something, and he tracked it all down, like I'll follow the breadcrumbs and all that stuff. And good book. I think it might be out of print, but if you can get your hands on it, if you see one at a bookstore or whatever, or a library fundraising sale, pick it up. It's a short read, and it's a good story. It really is. But having those sorts of breadcrumbs are really important. It's not perfect either. There's still some ways around it. There's no way to tell the good folks of the world information about it without the bad folks of the world learning about it. So I'm not going to elaborate on how it's not perfect, but attackers are clever, and so we need to have defense in depth. But it does help us deter unverifiable software and unauthorized binaries. It also helps deter the persistence. Basically, ESXi uses read-only OS images and RAM disks in order to reload itself. Like if you copy a file up to ESXi and then reboot it, that file won't be there anymore. It'll be reloaded from a RAM disk. And so protecting that method is really important to us. And so we feel strongly that it's going to help, but again, not perfect, just another thing in our arsenal. The more secure product defaults. There's a security configuration guide that we've always maintained, and there will be one shortly for vSphere 8. In fact, I'm validating it. When I'm done talking with you here, I will finish validating it for vSphere 8 so that you don't get bad guidance. I hate telling people the wrong things, and making sure that it all works just fine. But It's our goal to release a new version of it with every subsequent vSphere release as well. And so one of the things as part of vSphere 8, we had an opportunity to change some of the defaults. Why deliver a product that you have to harden? Why don't we just supply it hardened, right? And the obsoleted guidance is one big reason why we've changed this. We're taking a stance. Turns out a lot of the historical security advice that's out there, maybe not from VMware, but from other places, there's a bunch of it that doesn't even apply to vSphere. And I did a bunch of research end of last year about, what that stuff was. And there's 41, historically, there's been about 41 VM advanced parameters that various security scanners check for. 20 of them aren't even implemented. So let's get rid of those. Let's get those completely out of there. Let's take a stance. So many of those I actually added to the security configuration guide and then removed them, and so that's, a big hint that let's get those out of there. Evolving guidance, Active Directory, credentials. Our credential compromise is probably the number one way we see environments that are compromised. The attackers break into a desktop, send somebody a phishing email. Humans are humans. We click on the darndest thing. In fact, you can make Unicode and DNS great for global support of many languages. Terrible for security because you can make a lot of URLs look like legitimate URLs, but they're not. Especially I've got bifocals nowadays. I'm getting older here, and as much as I don't want to admit it, and that URL on my phone, like as my phone gets farther from my face, that's I might click on some, not that I'm not perfect, but I might click on something that is really not something good to click on. And, humans are humans. They're going to do stuff. And so protecting against that. But the attackers get in that way. They pivot. They look instantly for Active Directory because it's the keys to the kingdom, right? Every organization has got an Active Directory that's central to it in some way. And if they can get into that, they can, and most organizations use it for both authentication, me logging in as Bob, and authorization. Bob gets to be a vSphere admin. And so they log in and they break into Active Directory. And then all they have to do is they get domain admin, drop themselves into the vSphere admins group, the firewall admins group. That's scary right there. Storage admins group, backup admins group. And now they can do whatever they want, right? Shut off security controls and that. So, recommendations to connect things to Active Directory, wherever you see that, you need to take that with a grain of salt. I know like the DISA-STIGs, for example, the U.S. Department of Defense requires that. But is that good advice for general populations for the rest of the world? Possibly not. You got to evaluate it yourself. NIST 800-63B, it's password guidance. Specifically the guidance that says don't force people to change their passwords anymore, on a regular basis. That's actually not good. Trying to evolve our guidance to respect that. Compliance banners. Read some materials. John Strand's book. I forget the title of it. Sorry, John. John, part of Black Hills Information Security, wrote a nice book covering a lot of the stuff, had a really impassioned argument for compliance banners, the legal banners, just being able to, if you actually catch an attacker, you want to be able to prosecute them without them saying, oh my goodness, oh my goodness, I didn't know, it's ridiculous, but the legal system is what it is. So that sort of thing. Defaults also go everywhere. That slide earlier where it shows up in VCF, it shows up for vSAN, shows up in the cloud as well. And so it's just things that we don't have to worry about anymore. They also reduce leaning into the defaults, which we urge, if you know the defaults and they're secure, it's just something you don't have to manage anymore. You can assume that it's covered. You can still set them specifically, and I used to do that myself just to get the compliance scanners to stop, but to stop bugging you, to turn it green on the reports. But that might be a hill we want to die on. That's actually a fight I'm going to pick in the next year. Let's clean up those security scanners and things. And I think there's a lot of willingness to do that, by the way. So I'm not picking on security scanners. They're helpful in many ways, but Infrastructure hardening. We're going to talk about that. We're going to walk through all of the security configuration guide on Halloween, a very spooky thing. I don't know if I'll wear a mask or something, but yeah, join us for that. One of the other things too is we're putting these security best practices. The security configuration guide is going to end up in the documentation itself, and that'll be part of GA, not IA. Here, the GA release will have the best practices in there, and that helps ensure with update releases, it's got process benefits for us internally at VMware. That sounds selfish, why am I talking about that? But if we can streamline things, you get better guidance, and we have more time to do advanced things, like actually automate this thing. What if I had a Power CLI script that just did this stuff for you? Hey, that's a really interesting idea. There's been developments on that front too. The documentation's got incredible Google SEO juice, when you, and it's kind of frustrating when I see other sites. There's a lot of good advice on the internet. There's a lot of bad advice on the internet. And I don't like it when our own guidance, searching for it, takes somebody to a site that's got out of date advice, for example. And so this is a fix for that. The biggest thing, though, is just authoritativeness. It's putting our good advice out front and being able to point to it, say, hey, these are our best practices. You might disagree with some of them. You might not be able to do all of them, but this is how we feel about it. And it's in the docs, right? This is how the product works. And it helps vSphere admins argue back with, not that we're not all on the same team, InfoSec and compliance and all that stuff, but, to actually point to it and say, this is how it works. It's really important. And so, yeah. I don't see any questions out here. I'm sorry if I've put you all to sleep and, or you've all fell off your chairs and hurt yourself. I'm truly sorry about that. But if you've got questions, put them out here. We've had a few, and I like the questions. But I will continue on. I've got a few more slides. I know we're getting towards the end here. We're going to go over the hour a little bit, but that's all right. If you have to drop off, feel free to come back and pick up where you left off. The stream will be up as saved in our YouTube channel for a while, and then we'll schedule the next week's as well. But one of the things also I wanted to talk about with documentation, one of the biggest things about putting our security guidance there is there's a formal feedback process. It's not just email some guy named Bob and hope that he sees it in his email. And I'm sorry about that if my email's a mess. But there's a feedback link. When you see something wrong, and I don't like if you see something, say something stuff, snitches get stitches sort of thing too. There's a balance there. But if you see something that's wrong with the documentation, it's possible. Say something. Add feedback. Maybe something isn't completely clear. And what happens when you click that feedback link that's there? It'll pop open a box, and on the back end, it opens a documentation bug, a formal bug with VMware about the documentation. And the writers get it. They will share it with guys like me, and then we'll sort it out. There's been a lot of improvements to the documentation throughout the years because of that feedback mechanism. This is something that you can do yourself. You don't have to go through your sales team, any of that stuff. And please, if you see something, say something in that regard. We get asked almost daily whether our products use SHA-1, part of compliance questionnaires and that, whether our products have SHA-1 in them. And the answer is yes, our products have SHA-1 and SHA-2 and MD5 in them and all that. And people go, oh my goodness, isn't that insecure? Again, context matters, but we don't use them for new things anymore. We're replacing all of these with SHA-256, which is generally considered best practice at this point. They have to be there. We use OpenSSL libraries on the back end. We do ascribe to the idea that you shouldn't roll your own cryptographic libraries. OpenSSL is a really quality one, and it's got these capabilities in it. So our product will have these, and we need them for backwards compatibility. If you want to be able to upgrade from vSphere 6.5 to 8 in some way, we need to talk to the older products and older environments that use these. But for new things moving forward, we're not using them anymore. And so that's the real story, and that's the honest story there. And compliance auditors tend to like that as well. It's not just no, we're not using it. Yeah, it's there, but we don't use it, unless we absolutely need to for backwards compatibility. Speaking of forwards, due to some of we're trying to comply, especially in our cloud environments, IL6, the U.S. Department of Defense security levels and compliance levels, information level 6. It requires default key sizes that are larger than the 2048 bits that we've traditionally had. So we can still do 2048, but if vSphere is generating them from now on, they'll be 3072 bits. And that's customizable. You can change that. I think we actually support for custom certificates and the custom private keys, pardon me, all the way up to 16,384 or something. But again, the documentation has all that. I don't have to keep it here. The docs have it. Cloning workflows, we talked about this already. The choice to vSphere 8 has the choice of what to do with a VTPM if you've got one configured. And do you want to copy it? Do you want to just replace it? Replace is basically remove the one that might have secrets in it and put a new blank one in there, that sort of thing. So one of the big things, if you read the release notes, is deprecation. And it's a source of much discussion around these sorts of things. We deprecate features from time to time. And what we mean by deprecation is that this feature, so if we deprecate something, the local plugins are a good example of something that we've deprecated. The plugin architecture is changing. And so local plugins can still be installed through the lifetime of vSphere 8. But the next version of vSphere, vSphere 9 or whatever we call it, won't have that functionality available to it. And you won't be able to have a local plugin. This gives you about 7 years to figure it out, and I know all of us, as I tend to do, is just forget about it for 6.99 years and then go, oh my goodness, what's going to happen. But in general, the partner ecosystem sorts it out sooner than that. And so by the time we figure it out, we can just, upgrade software in that. However, when we do say removed, it's gone, and so stuff that was deprecated in 7 should be gone now in 8. That's not always the case, but in deprecation, we might make the choice to do that. Some of the authentication mechanisms that folks were asking about earlier were deprecated in 7, and we've kept them in 8 because we don't want to remove functionality necessarily. We want to replace it, like have a different way to do the same thing, often a more efficient way of doing the same thing. So TPM 1.2s those TPMs were really low function compared to TPM 2.0. And so we've removed them now in 8. If you've got TPM 1.2s, probably older hardware at this point anyhow. So yeah, we're not using that anymore. Integrated Windows authentication is deprecated. Again, supported through the life of vSphere 8, but it won't be there moving forward in the next major version. Not update releases, but the next major version. SIM, I don't even know what SIM stands for. Something information management, common information model, perhaps. Deprecated. Security configuration guide for ages has recommended shutting it off, and we still recommend that sort of thing. And so, and then the local plugins. We're going to a remote plugin architecture. Plugins in general, if you can avoid plugging things in and tying your systems together, that's great from a security perspective. Attack surface is less. The attackers really like the single pane of glass as well. In fact, an old friend of mine, the guy I used to work with, always called it the single glass of pain. Single panes of glass always tend to be more trouble. Most often tend to be more trouble than they're worth, that sort of thing. Just connecting systems together. So might think about just not doing that, especially to enforce security boundaries. Virtual hardware 20 is a really interesting thing. You might say, Bob, why is this a security thing? Is it part of a security talk? But there's a bunch of this. vMotion is a security feature, straight up. The ability to patch, performance and availability are often tied together, that sort of thing. And so virtual hyperthreading is a really interesting thing, being able to expose the hyperthreading constructs in physical hardware to the VM itself. Virtual NUMA, the same thing, the non-uniform memory access stuff, exposing that so that a VM can interact with hardware without having to translate things, interact with hardware in a very performant way. vMotion notifications, the idea that applications, how how many people don't use vMotion because people are scared of it? DBAs. In my past, DBAs didn't like vMotion because there was a little blip there. vSphere 7, vSphere 8, a lot of improvements to vMotion as well. I don't cover that here. I probably should. But a lot of improvements to vMotion to make that blip way, way smaller and take advantage of fast networks and all of that stuff. And we can now tell the applications, hey, you're about to vMotion as part of a normal maintenance operation, and so that ought to help a lot. LSI SaaS drivers, Microsoft would like us to stop using those drivers. We're actually maintaining them on behalf of Broadcom. Broadcom. And so there's a process to automatically convert them to PVSCSI if you'd like to do that. OpenGL 4.3 and UEFI 2.7a. I don't know the specifics of what's in there, but these are for compliance with and support for Windows and things. It's good to keep those standards up to date. The big one here, inbox drivers. I actually learned this last week on my talk that the PVSCSI and VMXNet 3 drivers are shipped. I didn't know what inbox meant. I'm not a Windows guy. I'm a Linux guy and an old Unix guy. Inbox means it's in the box. And so like Linux, where you can just install with PVSCSI and VMXNet 3 by default, you don't have to go through the LSI SaaS stuff. You can do that now with Windows too. So when you're building your Windows Server 2022 images and Windows 11 and all that stuff, just set it to PVSCSI, set it to VMXNet 3 from the start, and you just skipped a whole bunch of steps. That's really cool. I wanted to mention too, all of the VMware Tools drivers are available in WSUS, the Windows Update stuff. So you can import those directly into your WSUS servers and patch them. And in fact, I urge you to do that. Patching that stuff is really important. We do like having you run the VMware Tools, but at the very least, keeping the drivers up to date is important. I put this in here. This is from VMware Explorer. This US, a month and a half ago, and by two of our performance engineers or people that are very interested in performance. They talk about the virtual hyperthreading. They talk about a lot of the advanced performance stuff. And again, not necessarily security. In fact, the first 5 minutes of this talk is talking about the spelling of VMware, VM capital W, and Valentin's a funny guy, but I urge you to check it out. There's a bunch of this stuff. And, should you scan a QR code that's out on the internet? There's people that go either way, but that's the URL. That's a redirector because the URL for the Explorer is really long. So whatever. DPUs, distributed service engine. I don't want to go too deeply into this, but the idea that we can use dedicated processing power on a card, on a network interface or something to help us process network traffic, to help us process vSAN and storage traffic in the future, that sort of thing. And that we can gain we can enforce, it's kind of like the VTA model where there's another external entity enforcing policies. We can enforce those policies. We can do it for vSphere itself. We can do it for bare metal as well, which is a really intriguing thing. Simplify operating models across an entire environment, not just inside the virtual stuff. Organizations still have a few physical hosts sometimes, and that's important. Not just for ESXi. These cards. So you may have heard of ESXi on ARM. Probably the worst kept secret VMware's had for years. This is where it's ending up. These are ARM CPUs. They're custom built, and the ESXi version is ESXIO. We're clever sometimes with our names, and you do have to, if you're going to do this, go down this route, you do have to use vSphere Lifecycle Manager in image mode. There's a management NIC for some of the stuff. You've got a management NIC for your NIC. That's very meta. But, no need to do, if you've got performance, especially, there's, you can get away from the SRIOV stuff. You can get away from some of the complexity there. There's also different paths. There's ASICs and FPGAs in there for fast processing of stuff, and ARM CPUs for slower, I wouldn't say slow, but slower processing, but a single driver model, that sort of thing. And It's just part of Lifecycle Manager. When you install it, it's the installer for 8 says, "Hey, you've got a DPU in here. Would you like to install?" Like, why, yes, I would install, or that would be great. And the image compliance, here's a snapshot of that sort of thing. So this is a fertile ground, a green field that we're going in here. There's a lot of implications here, and it'll be really fun to watch how this evolves. On a more mundane note, there's sort of the sexy security features, and then there's the, totally necessary and important to core operations in organizations, but people don't think it's sexy at all. One of our engineers, a guy named Mark, wonderful human being as well, went through and fixed a lot of the logging in ESXi and vCenter Server and things so that it complies directly with RFCs. And this should be a real boon to making, the log insight content packs and, detections there, the Splunks and syslog servers and all of that stuff of the world that SOCs use to kind of keep tabs on things. This should help immensely, but you got to be at vSphere 8 to get it. Mark wrote a document that I helped publish about these log formats. It's here. Again, QR code, but that's the actual URL. It's small enough that I can put it in here. And then Lifecycle, getting towards the end here. The Lifecycle is really important to security. We often don't talk about it as security, but it's how, patching is how you remove vulnerabilities. And again, like I said earlier, patching is thankless. At the best, you get back to the level that, at the best, nobody knows you did anything, right? And at the worst, something changed and it was a negative experience. We're really trying to reduce that. But, sometimes there's implications with other parts of the ecosystem too. So main things here, standalone hosts can be patched via API now. That's for automation. That's really important. There's a lot of people doing standalone hosts. It's kind of mind-boggling. And but hey, the beauty of vSphere is it's very flexible. Sometimes the pain of it is it's very flexible too, but a lot of ways to do the same thing, a lot of ways to get the problem solved. Parallel host updates. You might say, Bob, didn't Update Manager have that? And I said, maybe I'm having audio problems here. Lifecycle Manager is really trying to keep the deprecate the Update Manager baselines. In fact, the baselines are deprecated themselves. So switching to the image mode is really important. That's something that you're going to want to. Again, deprecation means it's still around, but you're probably going to want to switch to it anyhow. Lifecycle Manager is really great on a number of fronts, and they've done a really good job in engineering and product management, designing it and thinking about how it works as far as keeping hosts in a known, defined state. And so if there's extra stuff on there that shouldn't be, it gets removed. If there's new stuff that needs to be there, it gets added. And it can work with hardware managers, so the Dell open managed stuff that can talk to iDRAX directly. I generally don't recommend installing the open managed stuff. That's another one of those plug-in sorts of things that most organizations don't need it in their back doors. But those hardware managers can talk to iDRAX directly. So what if you just had the Lifecycle Manager talk to that, and then you can define a base firmware level and maybe storage device level, driver levels, and all of that stuff, firmware levels as part of your image, and you can do that now, and that's really powerful. Configuration profiles. Looking forward, host profiles have been around with us for a long time. Can we do the same thing with the configuration of the host? And so that's a tech preview, and it's really interesting. You might want to check it out. And then cluster key value store. Can we get vCenter Server to be less of a dependency? Can it, there's so much cluster state that vCenter Server holds. Why don't we just have the cluster keep track of it, right? And so starting to do that, those VCLS VMs that got introduced in vSphere 7 that, people like and don't like and that, but starting to use that for more and more stuff. And so those are important. But I do, just tongue in cheek, I do want to say, hey, Lifecycle, we got that covered for you if you're a VMC customer, a VMware Cloud on AWS customer. So most of the stuff anyhow, you still need to worry about the Lifecycle, your workloads, but this is a lot of load off your shoulders too. I would be remiss in not mentioning vSphere Plus. Speaking of cloud things, the idea that there's a centralized management plane now that's out in the cloud, trying to drive efficiencies. How can we help the humans of IT do this stuff faster, better, without, and get back to your business? Get back to going home, reading books with your kids and drinking a beer, like whatever, like this stuff is overhead. And so if we can help people do it and help organizations that may not have the staff time for it, if we can help them get it done faster, that's a win. So something to think about. I don't know. I'll take my marketing hat off now. I'm pretty much to the end here. I really appreciate all of you that have stuck with me. Sorry, this has been a little long, but massive brain dump, honestly, about all of our cloud infrastructure stuff. Talk about some resources. Core.vmware.com. We've got a number of TechZone instances out there. There's a VMware Cloud TechZone instance that has a lot of great migration information there. I'm part of that team now. I was part of the vSphere team prior. About this time last year, I moved over to the cloud side of things, and it's a different world. That's definitely a thing, but it's cool. There's new stuff. There's stuff that you can do over there that you can't do on premises. But again, cloud operating models are ways of thinking. They're not a location, and so you use what helps you. You use all the locations and the clouds and on premises and that to their strengths, right? And that's really cool. At any rate, I digress, which happens. Core.vmware.com is the core infrastructure, the vSAN, vSphere, VCF side of TechZone, and I still have all my security stuff over there, even the cloud things. And so you can go check it out. There's a security page, there's a compliance page, there's ransomware. Compliance is a lot easier in the cloud too, because we take care of most of the stuff on the back end, and you just have to worry about the workloads. But we'll talk about that in 2 weeks, I believe. And so ransomware resource center as well. Some, again, people and process sorts of things. A lot of these ransomware is a thorny problem because there's not a single thing. We get asked, how do you patch for ransomware? Well, you don't, like it's a multi-layer thing, and you can check it out. We've got a bunch of guidance. This is an old screenshot. There's a bunch of new guidance out there too, and ideas, just stuff where you kind of plant the seed of things to think about in your environment. The last thing that I want, if you do nothing else at the end of this, please sign up for our security advisory mailing list. I like to joke that this is the most negative mailing list you'll ever be part of, at least from VMware, but it's only security advisories. It's only, hey, you should know about this stuff because, it might impact you. And you want to hear about it at the same time. There's no way to tell the good folks of the world this information without also telling the bad folks of the world. And so, at the best, you hear about it at the same time. And that's what we would like to have happen. And so the sign up for this, and and in the know, like Log4j is a good example. Log4j, many of our customers actually thought Log4j was our problem, which it was in a certain way because we were using Log4j in 40 of our products, but it was a global problem. Many of our customers actually had to communicate that because they learned of it from a security advisory mailing from us. And we're kind of proud of that, to be honest. Our goals here are transparency, honesty, and just, help you get back to a safe state. And so at any rate, I appreciate you all very much. I see a thanks out there. You're welcome. Absolutely. I hope you got something from this. If you didn't, I'm sorry. But thank you for being our customers. Thanks for exploring the world of the cloud and cloud infrastructure with me when it comes to security. And again, tune in next week, the week after, and Halloween, the 31st of October, for additional content, additional things going on. So on behalf of all of VMware, thank you very much. Take care of yourself, okay?